All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something a lot of you have been asking about: Claude 3.5 Sonnet and GPT-4o.
Yeah, two of the biggest names in AI right now, battling it out in 2025.
Exactly. And you guys have sent us a ton of stuff to go through. I mean, we've got technical specs, benchmark results, what developers are saying, even like a whole video script comparing them.
It's like a full-on AI showdown, all the data we could want.
Yeah, so our goal today is to figure out what really sets these two apart. What are they best at? Where do they, maybe fall short? So you listening can figure out which one might be the right tool for you.
We're going to break it all down.
Okay, so first up, one of the biggest differences that jumps out is how much these models can actually process, right? Like how much information they can handle at once.
Yeah, and this is where the whole context window thing gets interesting.
Context window.
Right, so Claude 3.5 Sonnet, it's got a massive 100,000 token context window.
Okay, now hold on. Tokens, remind us what those are again.
Sure. Think of tokens as like the basic building blocks of language that these models get, like a word or part of a word, even punctuation. So with 100,000 tokens, Claude can basically keep a whole book's worth of information in its memory as it's working.
So it's not just reading more, it's understanding the whole thing, like the connections between all those different parts.
Exactly. Like imagine feeding it a giant code base or a huge research paper. It can theoretically understand all of it at the same time, which means it can reason about the whole thing in a much deeper way.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. So you could ask it questions about anything in that whole massive document and it wouldn't lose track.
Right. Now, GPT-4o, it's got a context window of 32,768 tokens. Still a lot, but way less than Claude. But from what we've seen, this seems like a choice they made, like they optimized it for something else.
So what, like being really efficient with what it does know?
Exactly. It seems like GPT-4o is less about handling tons of information and more about being super precise with what it does take in.
So it's kind of like Claude is the memory champion who remembers everything about everything, and GPT-4o is the laser-focused expert who just needs the key details.
That's a good analogy.
Okay, so Claude can hold all this information, but how fast can it actually use it? Let's talk speed.
All right, so when it comes to responsiveness, GPT-4o comes out ahead.
How much faster are we talking?
It's got a 24% faster average latency compared to Claude, which means if you're building something where speed is super important, like a chatbot or something, GPT-4o could feel way snappier.
Makes sense. But I did notice something interesting about how their speed breaks down.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Claude seems to take a bit longer before it starts giving you an answer, like that first bit of output.
Okay.
And then it also gives you fewer tokens overall. It's almost like it's thinking harder before it speaks, and then it's more concise.
That's a good point. Maybe it is doing more processing up front, taking advantage of that big context window to really understand everything before it answers.
And maybe that leads to a more, thought out response.
Possibly, it's a different approach for sure.
Okay, so for those situations where speed is key, GPT-4o seems to have the edge. But there's more to AI than just text, right? What about the whole multimodal thing?
Yeah, multimodal is huge. Being able to handle not just text, but images, audio, all of it. And that's where GPT-4o really shines right now.
So it can do things like describe an image or take commands by voice?
Exactly. It's built for that kind of stuff right out of the box.
What about Claude? Is it stuck in the text world?
For now, yeah, its main focus is on being really good with text. But Anthropic is definitely working on multimodal stuff.
So it might catch up eventually.
That's what it sounds like. They're putting a lot of emphasis on building things safely and making sure they can scale.
Interesting. So for now, if you need multimodal, GPT-4o is the way to go. But let's talk coding. That's something that a lot of our listeners care about. What's the word on the street?
Well, developers seem to really like GPT-4o for code generation, especially for languages like Python and JavaScript. They say it gives them really clean, well-structured code.
So if you want an AI that can write code you can actually use, GPT-4o is the one to go for.
That's the general consensus. But Claude does have its advantages here too. It's known for being faster at generating code.
So you could use Claude to get something down quickly, and then maybe GPT-4o to clean it up and make sure it's perfect.
Yeah, some developers are doing that. And there's also the whole context window thing again. With that massive memory, Claude might be really good at working with really big, complex code bases. Like, it can keep the whole architecture in its head at once.
That makes sense. Okay, so each model has its own strengths there. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Cost. How do they compare?
This is where there's a big difference. Claude is actually about 40% cheaper for input tokens compared to GPT-4o.
Wow, 40%. That's huge.
Yeah.
Especially if you're processing a lot of data.
Right. Now, for output tokens, they both cost the same.
Interesting. So it's really about how much you're feeding into the model. If you've got tons of data to process, Claude could save you a lot of money. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of how well they actually perform. We've got some benchmark results for zero-shot chain of thought reasoning.
Oh, yeah. This is good stuff.
For those who haven't heard that term before, explain what that means.
So zero shot means the AI hasn't been specifically trained on the exact problem it's being asked to solve. And chain of thought is where it has to explain its reasoning process step by step. It's like showing your work in math class.
So we're seeing how well they can think through new problems on the fly.
Exactly. And in these tests, which were often pretty math-heavy, GPT-4o did better. It had an accuracy rate of 76.6% compared to Claude's 71.1%.
So a few percentage points higher.
Yeah, but in these really complex scenarios, that can make a big difference. GPT-4o seems to be really good at figuring things out from first principles, even when it's something it's never seen before.
Interesting. So advantage GPT-4o for those really tough reasoning challenges.
Yeah.
But what about the actual user experience? What's it like to use these things day to day?
Well, this is where it gets more subjective. Some people say Claude's interface is more intuitive and that it feels faster, even though the numbers might say otherwise.
So it might depend on what you're using it for and just personal preference.
Definitely.
Okay, now we've got this video script that frames the whole thing as an AI battle. How did they break it down?
So they had these different rounds. The first one was speed and context mastery. And they basically said that Claude's huge context window is awesome for anyone working with really long documents or big data sets. But they also acknowledged that GPT-4o is really accurate on shorter tasks and better at zero-shot reasoning, even if it is technically faster overall.
Right, so it's that trade-off again. What about the next round, language and reasoning?
They said that Claude seems to be better at understanding really nuanced arguments and opinions, especially when the sentiment in the text is kind of shifting around. It's like it can really grasp the subtleties. But GPT-4o was praised for its consistency and its ability to learn from just a few examples. It's also seen as more versatile, good at writing creatively, coding, and of course, multimodal stuff.
So Claude for those really complex, context-heavy arguments, and GPT-4o for being more of an all-rounder.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
And then we talked about multimodal capabilities already. What did the video script have to say about that?
They were pretty upfront about GPT-4o being the winner there in 2025. They said that because it can already handle text, images, and audio, it's just more useful for a wider range of applications right now. The Claude side acknowledged this, but they said Anthropic is committed to developing multimodality in a way that's safe and scalable. Like, they're being more cautious.
Interesting. And what about the coding showdown?
They basically echoed what we already discussed. GPT-4o is preferred for clean, well-structured code. But Claude might be better for working with really massive code bases because of that giant context window.
Okay, so it all comes back to that memory. So what was their final verdict? Who did they pick as the winner?
They didn't really pick a winner. They said if you need deep context, fast responses, and good opinion analysis, go with Claude. But if you need multimodal stuff, balanced performance across a lot of different tasks, and good creative ability, go with GPT-4o.
Which makes sense, right? It all depends on what you need.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all answer here.
So for you listening, think about what's important to you. Is cost a big factor? Do you need speed? Do you need multimodal capabilities? Do you need to process huge documents? Do you need accurate code generation?
All good questions to ask.
And based on those answers, you can figure out which model is right for you. But here's a final thought. What if you could combine the best of both worlds? What if you could use both models together, leveraging their unique strengths to do things we haven't even thought of yet?
Now that's a cool idea.
Like, what new problems could we solve if we could tap into both of their superpowers? It's something to think about. Anyway, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Let us know what you think.
Until next time.
What are your thoughts on today's topic? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay blessed.